Episode 42, Practicing What He Preaches as Founder and CEO of Spartan, Joe Sena. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Joe Sena. Joe is the founder and CEO of Spartan, the largest obstacle racing series in the world. He is also a New York Times bestselling author of multiple books, including Spartan Up, Spartan Fit, and most recently, the Spartan Way. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for being patient and allowing me to do my rope climbing while we talk.
Yeah, those that cannot see, of course, which is everybody since it's an audio podcast. Joe is in the midst of a workout while we do this, which is quite impressive. And I'll keep sitting on my tail doing the interview. So, Joe, Spartan isn't the first business venture of yours. You've been building these businesses since you were a kid. Fireworks, T-shirts, pool cleaning supplies. So I guess the question is, where does all this entrepreneurial fire come from? Like, why are you so passionate to build businesses?
It's funny, my buddy Chris is sitting in the office here with me, and we were just talking about this very thing. And the neighborhood I grew up in was a pretty tough neighborhood, and you had to be a hustler. Whether you were a good guy or a bad guy, you had to hustle to kind of get ahead in that neighborhood. And I think I always questioned myself as a young person, like, was I on the level? Could I keep up with the folks that owned businesses and had Cadillacs and made money? And my dad was a workaholic maniac. He was an entrepreneur. He had many, many businesses. So I don't know. I mean, I look at my children now. We have 4 children, my wife and I, and I was definitely pre-teens. I don't know if I was single digits, but I was pre-teens, and I was selling fireworks. I was buying from suppliers. I was just a maniac at a very young age.
Did you catch the bug from your dad, or there was just something in you that you just love being an entrepreneur and starting things?
I certainly was wired as an entrepreneur. I certainly had that DNA, which my dad would always say, you have to have the stomach for it, right? Because you've got the ups and downs. But I was just so young that I don't think anybody sat me down and said, this is the way you do it. I think it just kind of oozed out through osmosis of the neighborhood and into most of us. Everybody had some sort of hustle and figured out how to buy something for $1 and sell it for $2. I would imagine if you're in the Middle East or in a carpet selling district in India, very young kids can do the same thing.
What I didn't mention in the intro, you yourself are an extreme athlete competing in just about every ultra endurance race, extreme race that exists. So if you think about all of these races, all of these competitions over your life, if you had to pick one that was the most grueling that you've ever done, what would it be?
The most grueling endurance event I've ever done, I would say, is running a business. The actual events, I could be in waist-deep snow, 30 below zero, doing the Iditarod by foot. And
wait, hang on. You did the Iditarod by foot?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Before I answer that, that's like a vacation. And I don't say that facetiously or I don't want anybody out there listening and thinking, oh, he thinks he's so tough because he's describing an Ironman or Iditarod or whatever it is. But a business just sucks. Everything it just sucks the life out of you, right? Payroll and budgets and numbers and hiring and firing and personalities, and it's relentless. It never ends. But with an endurance event, you're looking at mountains, the sun comes up and goes down, you see a wild bear, there's food and water at aid stations, you're with buddies, you have time to think, you're meditating, it's a dream come true. So but a business isn't like that.
Joe, I spent a career in Silicon Valley. I was an entrepreneur. I've got to have about 1,000 friends who are entrepreneurs. They cannot walk the Iditarod. I mean, I'm telling you, I get you. Business is hard. Now I'm going to ask you to just give me a quick snippet on this Iditarod that you walked.
But before we do get into the Iditarod, I'm going to keep everybody in suspense. I would argue the opposite of what you just said. Like, as human beings, we are all wired to survive, to do these things, right? Like we would run from lions. We would chase down deer and antelope. We created fire. Like, we are a resilient bunch, these Homo sapiens, us, right? I disagree with you. And so I think sitting in our chairs and doing our podcasts, you and I, we learn some helplessness. But very quickly, if you get outside, like God forbid you and I were in a plane crash, and we had to go 400, 500 miles to safety through Alaska. What are you going to do? You're going to lay down and die because you spent 10 years in Silicon Valley? No. We're going to do it. We're going to get it done. You hear stories like that all the time of people that climb their way out of an avalanche or something. Like, you're just going to get it done unless you have some debilitating injury that just stops you in your tracks. And so...
Well, the lack of willpower in that scenario is death. Versus, not losing a few extra pounds or something.
No, but you let's go back to what you said earlier. You said, like, you couldn't. All your friends couldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't do it is a better way to say it. They wouldn't do it, right? And then I guess what I'm saying to them, if you run a business or you're thinking about starting a business, I would say you actually could do it, and you should do it because it's a lot easier than running a business. Unless you've got some business where you started it up and $500 million poured in and you got a giant salary and all of a sudden Google bought you out, which is like 1 in 5 billion. Like, that just doesn't happen, right? So now let's get into the Iditarod. My first business was construction. I used to clean swimming pools. I started building backyards and houses and all kinds of things. And so I found myself amongst a bunch of masons, not the kind with the secret triangle, but masons that mixed cement and laid bricks and carried stones and were just badass, tough people. And I felt alive being around masons because you mix cement, like, you've got limited time. It's going to get hard. You've got to really work your butt off. And I ended up in a job on Wall Street where I just didn't feel alive anymore. I was making a lot of money. I was sitting at a desk and you're eating a lot and you're getting all that action, but you don't have any physical activity. And so to get back to what it was like to mix cement and feel alive, I found endurance racing. I stumbled upon it. And my mother had introduced me as a young person to a 3,100-mile foot race in Queens, New York that still exists today called the Transcendence Run. 3,100 miles around a 1-mile loop. About 8 people sign up to this each year. I guess I learned at that point, even subconsciously, what the human being was possible of. Like, what you can do if you put your mind to it. And so I found endurance racing. I remembered that moment with my mom, and I just started racing. I just started doing crazy. The crazier it was, more interested I was. And so when I found about this Iditarod thing that we could do without the dogs, I was all in. This is going to be heaven. And so we were out there. I took a team of us, 4 of us, and it's like any movie, right? It's kind of like a movie in that the worst snowstorm rolls in. Like, everything that could go wrong does go wrong. But it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And I did, 100 of these things around the world. I went absolutely nuts, fell in love with it, which ultimately led to Spartan.
We'll come back to Spartan in a minute. One of these quotes of yours, I think it's one of your favorite quotes, is "Death is the price we pay for life, so make it worth it."
You like that, right? That's a good one. I think they're going to put that.
It's a great quote. But look, here's the deal, right? Not everyone has the same way of interpreting the, make it worth it part of it. So, maybe living in a beautiful national park and working as a ranger is one person's idealistic version of that. And maybe someone else, it's living on a farm and raising cows and chickens. I don't know. But for you, it's clearly about pushing the boundaries, about stretching your physical and mental being right up to the breaking point, so it seems. I guess, Joe, the question is why? I mean, just why? What compels you to push yourself so hard?
If you were interviewing the park ranger right now or the farmer, you'd be asking the same question, I guess, like why the farm?
Yeah, what's compelling about living on a farm with animals and raising them? And yeah, sure.
So what's compelling about just pushing the envelope and getting stuff done for me is, I guess it feels very like I have a farm. My wife and I, we lived on a farm. Our children were born on a farm. It was awesome on that farm. And I sat down for about 3 days and relaxed. And I looked around and I thought, this feels really selfish. I could just spend the rest of my days here on this farm and it would be awesome. But I still got stuff to do. Like I'm capable. I'm a maniac. I like to do stuff and I could help people. So that's what I do. That's right. Like it would feel like I'm cheating if I wasn't doing this.
I'm very familiar with Spartan. Not everyone is. Not everyone listening to this is familiar with obstacle racing. So I thought maybe for those that aren't, you could just start by describing what this obstacle racing craze is all about. Maybe describe like a typical race. I know there's different versions of it, but what types of things are involved?
Yeah, so it's basically a military-inspired obstacle race. So if you think back to that movie G.I. Jane, or you think about Navy SEALs or Delta Force, for them to be integrated into the military, they're going to have to go through some sort of training and crawling under barbed wire, climbing over walls, doing a rope climb. And so we just took those types of obstacles, added our own flavor to it, was able to somehow secure the greatest name in the world, Spartan, and a bunch of people, moms, monks, military, you name it, come out on a Saturday and Sunday, and they attempt to meet themselves. They come out to find out who they are, what they're made of. They come with friends. They help each other through and up and over obstacles. I have 3 distances, a 3-mile, an 8-mile, or 13-mile. And people want to achieve all 3 because what I learned years ago, was if you have a calendar on the books, if you have a date on the books on your calendar that you're going to do some events, all of a sudden you start going to bed earlier, you start waking up earlier, you're training harder, you're eating better. And so they sign up for multiple Spartan races and they transform. Just like iron transforms into steel by heating it and pounding it and drowning it. And so that's what we do. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Spartan today hosts more than 200 events in 40 countries and attracts over 1 million annual participants. That's all in less than a decade, which is incredible. So it feels like an overnight success to some degree, but it's my understanding that getting this off the ground wasn't so easy, that you'd spend all your money, set up an event, and then barely anyone would show up. So maybe you can talk about some of those early days, months, maybe the first couple of years and the struggle that it was.
Yeah, this has been an 18-year overnight success. If your Silicon Valley people are listening, they're going to love this story. So in 2000, when I had the idea that I was going to start putting on races and build somewhat of a social network for folks that would climb mountains or run across deserts, I was able to secure and buy the URL peak.com, peak.com. Paid $1 million for it in 2000, late 90s. And I could never make it work, partially because the world wasn't ready, partially because I had the wrong product. I was putting on races that were just too long of a distance, partially because there was no technology or environment for social networks at that point. It just wasn't as big as it is today. Fast forward, but I'm a stubborn bastard, and I kept putting on events and kept trying to make it work, and lost millions of dollars.
Well, hang on, let me just pause for 1 second.
Yep.
When you say you lost millions of dollars, were you losing investors millions of dollars, or did you do that well in Wall Street that you were able to invest all your money into this thing?
I had done well on Wall Street, and so stupidly, I was investing my own money to do this. And after the world ended in 2009, the financial world, I thought, you know what, this is really irresponsible. And coming into 2010, I was done. I was done with peak.com. I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. I was going to stop putting on races. Although I loved it, it was definitely my true north, I was done with it. And against my own will, because I'm a glutton for punishment and I just have entrepreneurship in my veins, I said, okay, I'm going to take one more stab. We're going to change the name, change the format. We'll call it Spartan. We'll put peak.com on the shelf here. and we'll see what happens. We'll make the format shorter. By then, Facebook was coming into its own. Lots of veterans were coming back from the military. CrossFit was becoming bigger. And I think 700 people showed up to that first race, which was about 699 more than were showing up to my other races. So it became interesting. So then we put on a second race and a third race and a fourth race. But because I had no experience in building a brand like this, I screwed up. In retrospect, I guess what brand builders do is they build out from a place where they get a foothold. They build out from rings around it. So if you're in New York, for example, then you'd go a little further to New Jersey. Maybe you go a little further out to Chicago and eventually work your way across the country. I went from like Vermont to New York to Canada to UK to Slovakia. And so none of those places really had a foothold. No one really knew who we were. And every time I announced an event, it cost me $600,000 because I got to market that event, I got to rent a venue, I got to build 30 obstacles, tractor trailers, trucks, employees. I was burning money starting in 2010 at 10x the pace I was burning money from 2000 to 2010. Nearly, you've heard these stories before, I'm sure, or experienced them even yourself, but nearly went out of business 3 or 4 times between, I would say, 2010 and 2013, and through a series of happenstance, luck, miracles, money would show up right when I needed it. Revenue would show up right when I needed it. All the employees were willing to cut all their pay to $2,000 a month, regardless of how hard they worked, right when I needed it. So everything just worked. And now we're profitable. We're in 42 countries, 275 events. We're the largest participatory sport in the world, endurance sport in the world. And I'm sitting here talking to you on my rope climber.
And I'm talking to you on my very nice, comfortable chair. So, short of running out of cash,
yeah.
How do you know that fine line between it's all about tenacity and resilience, which clearly you have plenty of, versus this isn't the right venture and I don't have the right, market figured out, and let me just go ahead and pack it in and try something else?
Well, the first 10 years from 2000 to 2010, by the way, I've done probably 200 podcasts. You have very good questions.
Oh, thank you.
The first 10 years, 2000 to 2010, I would say I had no business continuing what I was doing. The market was telling me it wasn't working. My product was wrong. I didn't even have enough time to spend on what I was doing. So those first 10 years made no sense. And the other thing is, the world just wasn't even into this stuff. So there wasn't a mentor or anybody that would say to me, oh, you're onto something, you should do this. It just made no sense from every direction to spend the kind of money I was spending. In 2010, had a little bit of traction, but even still then, it was oh, this is just a fad. There were 800 competitors popped up. Anybody with a screw gun became an obstacle course company. There was tons of pricing pressure, $29 to do a race. You just couldn't make the business work. But if the question is, why just stick with it? I guess the answer is because it was my true north, because I just loved it. And didn't feel like work. When you're burning through that kind of money and everything's against you, but you're still you must love it. And I loved it. And so I stuck with it. And, there was a guy from Discovery Channel that was at one of the races with me, and his job was to figure out which shows would resonate with their consumer base that watched Discovery TV. And he had been at many networks, so he really understood people and the way they think. And he was standing at one of these first Spartan races with me, and he said, you know what, Joe? I am seeing transformations take place right in front of my eyes. People are changing from the start line to the finish line. This is unbelievable. And just hearing that sentence and being very passionate about this thing was enough to say, you know what, I'm going to pour gasoline on this spark. We're going to put the pedal to the metal and go for it. I can't say anybody was on board with it. Eventually in 2013, 2014, investors showed up. They placed a bet with us. But along the way, my friends, my family, my bookkeeper, everybody said, what the hell are you doing? This is so irresponsible, so stupid. You're burning so much money. It's ridiculous.
Look, this is a hypothetical that's impossible to answer. but that won't stop me from asking it, which is, so let's say you put that pedal to the metal and you end up crashing. It just doesn't get lift off. It doesn't work. You run out of money. You run out of time. Looking back, do you think you would have said, okay, I'm an entrepreneur, I'll figure out the next one or the one after that? Or do you think you would have said, you know what, Wall Street wasn't so bad. It was good money, not that crazy of a lifestyle. Do you think you would have gone back to that life, or were you at this point like, hey, my true north is being an entrepreneur of some sort. I will continue to try it again and again and again till it succeeds?
Well, I'm not a quitter. And although it's a hypothetical, if it didn't work, what would I have done? I suspect I would have started another business because I would have been completely out of money. I had a family at this point, and some cows and some chickens and a farm. I would have been really upside down. So it really would have been like, how do I dust myself off and feed my family and survive? If we're creating that possible outcome, I probably went too deep. If you're single and you're young, like maybe a bunch of folks in Silicon Valley starting businesses, you go for it. You go for broke. You've got four kids. You're a little older. You just got married, right? Like, you probably don't do what I did. I probably was irresponsible. I definitely was irresponsible. I took it right to the red line. And thank God it worked.
So let's talk about branding for a minute. You said you had this peak. The peak name wasn't working. You came up with Spartan, which it's so obvious in hindsight. It's such a perfect name. But the company sort of creates the name, just like Starbucks. When you start out, Starbucks probably had no meaning.
Sure.
So tell me about the genesis of that. Did you come up with it? What did you want it to mean? And maybe fast forward to today, what does the Spartan brand mean today?
Yeah, we had 100 names on a page, and Spartan just jumped off that page. And we went with it. The original name was Spartan Race. We ultimately bought the word Spartan and the associated IP. But when I think back, I don't think you can compare Spartan to Starbucks, because Starbucks had no meaning, right? But Spartan had meaning for the last 2,600 years, and it's very austere, stoic, less is more. It just means something. No matter what country we go in, they just get it right away. Even if they don't know our brand, they know that word. Look, I think we would have been successful anyway, but I think we're about 10 times more successful because of the name. When somebody's considering training hard and competing and telling their wife what they're doing every morning at 5 a.m., like, makes sense, it's easier with a name like Spartan to explain it. It's easier to get a tattoo that says Spartan than had we named the company, Snowflake. I don't know.
Snowflake, by the way, it wouldn't quite work as well. It feels like there's sort of this delicate balancing act, where you're trying to build this aspirational brand with something, it feels reserved for hardcore athletes, or there's pride and glory in completing an event. But, you also want it to be attainable for the everyday weekend warrior, or you end up with a very, very niche market, right? Not much of a business. Like, how do you balance those two?
It's a tough one. We try to balance every day. If I had my way, we'd never get soft. It would always be a very hardcore message, hardcore videos, all the media we produce. But the reality is our mission is to get 100 million people off the couch. And so, our message appeals to a certain segment, but you've got to put out the olive branch and you got to balance it. But we cannot dilute this brand. I mean, Leonidas would turn over in his grave. Can you imagine how those 300 Spartans would feel if I turned Spartan into Snowflake? That would be a disaster. So we're threading that needle really, really carefully. But it's a very tough balance.
So what's been the biggest challenge for you personally as you started to scale the company? Like, once you're going from Joe, the startup entrepreneur, one-man band, to being a leader with an organization underneath you, what was that like? What kind of pains did you have to endure?
Sucks. It's hard to build a business this size. All the businesses I've had previously in my life, everybody's right in front of you. They're all motivated. I'm really good at getting people pumped up, but we've got a distributed workforce across the whole globe, and lots of people that I haven't even personally met. I don't get to work with on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard because you're trying to motivate this big thing on a daily basis to get stuff done. And, we're not selling cotton candy and handbags. So it's a really tough sale to the consumer that requires us to always be on. You've got to always be switched on here. We got 275 events. Every weekend could be 8 events, 10 events. And your front lines, your team, has to make sure that experience is incredible for folks. Thank God people that work for Spartan love the mission, and so they're driven and they get the job done. But it's hard. And it's my third act in life, right? So like I'm older at this point. If you back up and I was 23, forget about it. We would be, I can't even imagine, we probably would have taken over Tesla by now.
Well, it's hard, but do you still enjoy running the business?
I enjoy the business. I enjoy the mission.
Because a lot of entrepreneurs get to the point where they say, you know what, it's not fun anymore. Let someone else run it. I'll stay as the visionary founder, and I'll move on to the next thing.
It'd be awesome to be the visionary founder. There's just not a lot of CEOs, potential CEOs that would really understand this business. You got to get the right person. And you're giving me an idea for a fun video series I might do. Maybe we should do a call out globally. You should help me. We should do a call out. We're looking for Spartan's next CEO.
Well, I am an executive search consultant.
Perfect.
Everyone listening is going to think this is a setup, but it's not setup. But maybe we just did a deal here. So
yeah, I think we got to go after like some famous folks. You and I are gonna have some fun. We're gonna do a fun video series and try to search for the next Spartan CEO.
All right, I'm there. Joe, I'm always curious about the interplay between fitness and work.
Yeah.
You're this hardcore extreme athlete on the one hand, obviously an incredibly successful serial entrepreneur on the other. You think there's a connection between the two?
Listen, I think the mind and the body are one, right? The brain sits inside the body. If you don't take care of the body, you don't eat healthy, you don't train, and you don't keep it at peak performance, it's hard to expect that you're going to deliver your maximum potential at work. You can see, the audience can't see, that we got some really cool torture fitness equipment here, you can see. And I just make it part of my life. I carry around, take a look at that thing over there, that kettlebell. Carry around that kettlebell everywhere I go.
How heavy is that kettlebell?
That's 44.5 pounds, just under an extra charge at the airport. And I just make it part of my life.
So you feel you're a better business person because of the health and fitness?
There's no way anybody would argue the opposite. I got a call at 5 a.m. this morning from a billionaire that everybody would know. And he was having all kinds of health issues. And he's calling me for some advice. And I just think to myself, like, on the airplane, they say take the oxygen first and then share it with other people. Like, the first thing in your life, the most important thing before anything else, before your family, your kids, anything, is your health. Because you can't help anybody if you're not healthy. So you got to take care of that and then go down the list and pick your priorities. But 1,000% you're a better business person if you're healthy. 1,000%.
So if you think beyond business, does the health and fitness help in other areas of your life?
1,000%. Like, again, you might have to bleep some of this out, and not to be silly, but like, you're going to have a better intimate relationship with your wife if you're healthy and fit, right? Which means when you wake up in the morning, you're probably a little happier towards each other. Sounds silly.
No, it's not silly at all.
Like the Spartans believe. I was recently with the preeminent Spartan professor, 55 years, Cambridge University, and he said their number one thing was to take care of the structure. And I said, what's the structure? And he said, the body, the human body. They felt if they took care of this structure, everything in their life was better. They'd be more efficient, they'd get more done. Automatically, you'd have legacy because you're taking care of the here and now. So, like, I believe that.
So I'd love to hear some of your philosophy on nutrition and fitness. There's no shortage of diets out there and fitness regimens. So let's start with eating. Maybe you could just describe your diet and what do you believe in, or do you think there is one right way to eat?
Well, we probably, regarding diet, we probably grew up in different parts of the world and over thousands of years became better at digesting and processing the foods from that area. So I do believe, I've got no evidence, I'm not a scientist, but I do believe that makes sense. right? If you grew up in a place where the last 1,000 ancestors only ate rice and fish, you're probably really good at processing rice and fish. But my mother in the 70s was into a plant-based diet. She was vegan. She pushed that. I've got friends that have only eaten raw fruits and vegetables for 50 years. So I lean, and I've tested myself on long-distance events. I lean towards a plant-based diet. It's easier on the body, easier to digest, more energy out than energy required to break it down. And so that's the way I lean.
Are you a vegan?
Not a vegan, because there are times, 6 times a year, where all of a sudden I want a piece of meat. I don't know why. And I allow myself to have that. It's rare. It could be, like I said, half a dozen times per year. But I don't categorize myself that way where it's restrictive just because I want it to be restrictive. I allow myself to eat something for whatever reason my body's wanting it. I'm not a believer in tons of processed foods, although I have the same weaknesses that everybody else has, leaning towards them, and I got to constantly fight myself. But nuts, fruits, vegetables, I do like fish. I'm a believer in not eating too close to bedtime. Anytime I do, it's a disaster. You get a lousy sleep. I'm a believer in fasting. I try to fast 3 days every month, the end of the month typically.
What do you feel the intermittent fasting does?
It just allows your stomach more time to digest.
No, but I mean, how do you feel better when you do it?
Oh, I feel 1,000 times. I've done races like 12, 15 days. We've always performed, myself, my teammates, always perform better on less food. Never had an experience where more food was better. So I'm a big believer in that. I just feel better when I eat less. I only eat the amount I eat because for the same reasons all of us do, which is we just overindulge. It's at our fingertips. We've been trained the wrong way.
And so then shifting gears over to fitness, obviously when you're not doing an endurance race or doing a Spartan race, you've got people that say it's more important to do strength training, others that say it's all about aerobic activity. Then we've got the, interval training and high intensity workouts and cross training and hard to keep pace. Do you feel there's sort of a right way, or I should say an optimal way to tune your body?
Yes. The optimal way to train is to focus on flexibility and mobility. Why? It's the only thing that's going to stop you. In our example earlier, where you and I crashed that airplane and we had to travel 400 miles to safety, the only thing going to stop us is if we're not mobile, if we're injured. So I put a ton of effort into staying flexible and mobile and avoiding injury. From there, do anything you want. You do tons of burpees, go for a long run, go lift a stone. Doesn't really, whatever turns you on, but you've got to be flexible and mobile. So every morning I've got my ritual. I pick them up from my mom and all over the world from different folks, and then I add my burpees and carry my kettlebell and I do my rope climbing and whatever else. But stay flexible, stay mobile, and move. That's it.
So if that's all about optimizing the body, how about optimizing the mind? Do you meditate? Do you do yoga? Like, what do you do to stay focused and deal with stress?
My flexibility and mobility program is primarily based around yoga. My meditation program, I do probably 7 minutes before I fall asleep every night. I completely clear my mind. I'm laying down at this point, completely clear my mind, focus in on the light, and before you know it, it's the next day. I'm passed out. That's my meditation. I've never sat during the day and meditated. It's always, my mother taught me how to meditate years and years ago, and I just wanted to be efficient with it, so it was before I went to bed.
Is that how she taught you, or that's the Joe interpretation?
That was the Joe interpretation.
I might use it too. So I've read that your goal, or one of your audacious goals, is to change 100 million lives. You've already had, I think, 5 million people or more compete in a Spartan event. 5 million is not enough?
5 million is not enough. We're going to change 100 million lives. That's our goal. A little birdie told me that if we change 100 million lives, we get a free pass to heaven, me and the entire team. So that's what we're going for. And it's big, it's audacious, it's highly improbable, but we'll get it done. Anything I've done in my life was not supposed to happen, but you just keep banging your head against the wall until it does. So we'll get it done.
So with all this, the peak health you've got, all your business success, all the recognition that comes with both of those, are you happy? in the sense, like, do you wake up every day and lie down every night with a sense of contentment?
I'm really lucky. Pretty happy. I'm always happy. The only time I'm unhappy is when I got to deal with budgets and HR and all the stuff that, the difficult parts of a business. But otherwise, I'm always happy. You might not see it in my face. I don't have a happy face. I remember years ago in college, I was working as a bar back, and I'd carry beer up and down the stairs and clean glasses and do all that because I wanted to work, really work. And friends of mine that were in school would say, man, you got to smile and relax. And I thought, gee, I'm having a blast working hard, and all you idiots are getting drunk. And so you might not see it on my face, but yeah, I'm very lucky, knock on wood. I'm happy if I'm moving forward.
Do you have long-term life goals outside of the business goals that you sort of look as a guiding light?
I got to have 4 healthy, hardworking children. They don't have to win at anything. They just got to be hardworking. I got to make it to 100 years old so I could do a 100-mile snowshoe at 100. And my wife's got to outlive me. Those are my big ones.
The name of this podcast is The Art of Excellence. When you think of excellence, what comes to mind?
For me, excellence is just giving it everything you got. You can't always guarantee the outcome, right? When I look at my kids wrestle or do anything, win or lose, as long as they give it 110%, the kind of input that when we see it in a movie, any of us, we get chills, right? When you see that person up against the wall, man or woman, and they just don't give up, that's excellence.
Well, Joe, I got to say you're incredibly lucky to have found what your North Star is. I think most people in life never quite get there. Maybe don't even strive to find it, or maybe find it when it's too late. But you found it and you've embraced it. Love your story and love what you're doing, and it's been a really inspirational talk.
I've climbed 1,600 feet while I'm on the phone with you. That's excellence, by the way.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.